London like you've never seen before. Nearly 2,000 tractors have taken over the streets, bringing the capital to a standstill. What's behind this massive protest, and why are farmers risking everything to make their voices heard? The scene was almost surreal. Convoys of tractors, stretching as far as the eye could see, rolled into London from all corners of the country. Farmers who had traveled overnight from counties such as Kent, Somerset, Yorkshire, and beyond converged on London with one unified message. They are fed up, they are angry, and they want their voices to be heard in the heart of the British government. The convoy snaked through the streets of the capital, tractors filling historic boulevards and major thoroughfares, their horns echoing against the facades of government buildings and the walls of Downing Street. Congestion was complete. Traffic ground to a halt. This was a protest on a scale rarely seen in central London. Organizers of the demonstration say they brought 1,872 tractors into the capital. Whether the crowd was precisely that number or slightly fewer, the image of so many agricultural giants in the city is one that will not be forgotten soon. Drivers and passengers alike were caught in the chaos, stuck behind tractors that towered above ordinary vehicles, their engines sputtering and roaring with every blare of their horns as farmers vented their frustration. Many of the tractors bore placards and hand-painted slogans decrying government policy, calling for fairness, respect, and recognition. You could hear cynical laughter one moment and heartfelt shouts of support the next from passing pedestrians who had stopped their daily routines to watch the spectacle unfold. The farmers' convoy was primarily a protest against proposed changes to the UK's inheritance tax rules that would radically alter how family farms are treated when passed from one generation to the next. For decades, many agricultural families have enjoyed generous tax reliefs on farmland and associated properties, protections that made it possible for small-scale and family-run farms to remain viable across generations. But under new proposals expected to take effect in April 2026, those exemptions would be significantly reduced, meaning family farms could face huge tax bills simply for transferring their land and assets to children and heirs. Farmers argue that this threatens their very existence, that it will force hardworking families to sell land just to meet tax obligations, and that it hands an existential blow to British farming as a way of life. The farmers see this not as a fiscal change, but as an attack on the backbone of rural Britain and the agricultural sector. The line of tractors was not a random act of defiance. It was meticulously organized through coalitions of farming groups and grassroots organizations, including Save British Farming and various rural advocacy networks. One organizer described the protest as a last resort after months of pleading with politicians and government officials to reconsider the policy. Farmers felt ignored, brushed aside, dismissed as just another interest group, and they decided to bring their protest straight to the seat of power in order to force a conversation that they believe is crucial for the future of UK agriculture. The protest was timed to coincide with ongoing parliamentary debates and e-petitions, demanding changes to the inheritance tax rules, with more than 148,000 signatures having been collected by concerned citizens across the country. But the tractor takeover was more than political symbolism. It brought real disruption. Emergency services reported delays reaching critical incidents as congested roads made navigation difficult. Bus routes were diverted. Tube stations were busier than usual as frustrated commuters abandoned their cars, and the Metropolitan Police had to coordinate traffic control at a far greater scale than usual. Businesses in and around Westminster found themselves in a surreal position, open for business but surrounded by the clatter and hum of tractors. Some shops reported an increase in foot traffic as curious Londoners came to watch, while others said customers were too shut out by the disruption to make it into store. All across the capital, traffic apps lit up with warnings of delays, and social media was flooded with images and videos of tractors clogging roundabouts, lining Whitehall, blocking junctions, and refusing to budge. The Metropolitan Police had placed restrictions on the protest, particularly around the presence of vehicles within certain sensitive zones such as Whitehall itself. Officers warned that anyone bringing agricultural machinery into restricted areas would be asked to leave and, if they refused, could face arrest under public order laws. Despite these warnings, farmers pushed on with their plan, insisting they had the right to make their voices heard and that the conditions imposed by police were unreasonable and stifling of legitimate protest. Several arrests were made by police during the standoff, particularly as tensions escalated near key government offices. This raised concerns among civil liberties advocates who argued that peaceful protest is a fundamental right in a democratic society and that arresting farmers for making their way into the capital was a heavy-handed response. In response to the arrests, political figures from opposition parties stepped in to offer support, with some pledging legal defense for those detained and accusing authorities of overreach. One of the most controversial aspects of the protest was the presence of high-profile political figures lending their visible support. Nigel Farage, leader of the Reform UK Party, addressed the gathered farmers at points during the day, calling the demonstration persistent and peaceful and urging supporters not to be silenced. Farage framed the protest as part of a broader battle against what he labeled death taxes and criticized the government for ignoring rural voices. His presence highlighted just how politically charged this protest had become, transforming what might have been seen as a niche agricultural grievance into a wider cultural flashpoint about representation, fairness, taxation, and rural identity in modern Britain. But while some saw Farage's involvement as amplifying the farmers' cause, others feared it brought unwanted political baggage and risked overshadowing the core concerns of rural communities. Critics argued that turning what was fundamentally an agricultural issue into a broader political rally could alienate moderate supporters and distract from the very real economic pressures facing farmers across the UK. Many farmers themselves expressed mixed feelings about high-profile political figures joining their protest, with some welcoming the attention and others worried it might politicize an issue they see as nonpartisan and purely about survival. There is a fine line between raising awareness and turning a protest into a spectacle that loses focus on its critical demands. Economists have weighed in, warning that while the tractors might capture headlines, the situation facing the agricultural sector is highly complex. They point out that farming in Britain operates on thin margins, with profitability buffeted by global commodity prices, rising costs of fuel and fertilizer, labor shortages, and the after-effects of Brexit trade changes that reshaped market access and farm incomes. Many farmers feel they are being squeezed from all directions, while their contributions to food security and rural life are often underappreciated in policy circles. The proposed inheritance tax reforms are just the latest source of frustration in a long string of pressures that have left farmers feeling unsupported. This tractor protest is not unprecedented. London has seen similar rallies in recent years with hundreds, and on some occasions more than 1,000 tractors, rolling into central streets to protest various policies affecting agriculture and rural communities. These mass demonstrations serve both as a symbol of unity within the farming community and a direct appeal to lawmakers to reconsider measures that could harm long-term industry stability. The 2024 and 2025 protests have become part of a broader movement of rural activism gaining momentum on issues like trade policy, environmental regulations, and economic support for farms. This current protest arguably marks the most dramatic escalation yet, given the sheer number of tractors involved and the degree of disruption caused. For ordinary Londoners caught in the middle, the response has been mixed. Some expressed empathy for the farmers, recognizing that without a viable agricultural sector, there could be long-term consequences for food availability and rural communities. Others were irked by the chaos and inconvenience, annoyed that their commute was interrupted by giant tractors, and frustrated that the city's infrastructure was effectively taken over by heavy vehicles with horns blaring. Parents trying to pick up children from school, workers trying to make deadline meetings, tourists hoping to visit famous landmarks, all found their plans upended by the unexpected invasion of tractors. Social media was awash with clips of slow-moving tractor caravans crawling down the Mall, near Buckingham Palace, and alongside the Thames Embankment, with Londoners alternating between amusement, anger, and bewilderment. The protest, peaceful in its heart yet chaotic in its impact, has sparked urgent debate about the nature of protest, the responsibilities of government to listen to those it serves, and whether traditional forms of dissent still have a place in an era of digital activism. Tractors in the streets may seem unusual to urban dwellers, but for farmers who feel their livelihoods are at stake, it was a dramatic and necessary escalation to grab attention. It is clear that the deep sense of frustration running through Britain's agricultural heartlands cannot easily be ignored or dismissed. The question now is whether the tractor protest will lead to tangible political change, or whether it will be remembered as a dramatic but ultimately symbolic gesture that failed to shift the course of policy. As the sun set over London and tractors finally began their slow exodus from the capital, the rolling protests left behind a city changed for a day, roads cleared, and memories made. But for the farming community, it may mark the beginning of a new chapter of activism and engagement with political leaders who, until now, have seemed distant and unresponsive to rural voices. What happens next? Whether there will be follow-up actions, negotiations, concessions, or further escalation remains uncertain. One thing is indisputable. Britain witnessed a protest of historic proportions, and it was powered not by people on foot waving banners, but by nearly 2,000 tractors roaring through the streets of London in a message that will echo long after the engines fall silent.